sorry, after the last workshop where we were looking at assumptions, and I asked for any feedback, Councillor Pye sent me some really good feedback, and I've had one or two pieces from some other people. So I'm going to send you out a revised set of assumptions. They are not, there's no big critical changes, but there are some tweaks and some rephrasing of things. And we have the new Burrell figures now for the financial assumptions. So at the next workshop on the 10th of October, we will go through those with you. Okay. The other thing was we talked about what you think the big issues are, which will be leading into this discussion we're about to have. And I have put up a word salad that had a whole bunch of things. I am going to send out again through the poll everywhere. I'll send you an email that will allow you to vote for the things you think are the big issues in the community, and also allow you to provide some narrative if you have some comments you want to make, and we'll go over those on the 10th of October as well. Okay, so now we just want to hand it over to you. I trust that the Mayor and Councillor Booth would like to lead a lot of this discussion around affordability and immediate versus future needs. What are the trade-offs that you want to do? And so I'll hand the floor over to you.
Thanks. I've just got a couple of follow-up probably questions from the last slides. One was around development contributions. So we've talked about that for a long time. We don't have a policy. Is that on the cards, or can we move that forward? We've had, you know, development contributions versus financial contributions to the point where we're considering or having discussions last week on variation to district plan, etc., and the costs involved for council, largely unbudgeted again. Should we be changing and considering a DP? So development contributions policy, Andrew, should we be moving on that today rather than yesterday?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. There are pros and cons with development contributions. Firstly, yes, you can get quite a bit of money coming in from developers, but then there is the flip side is that council is committed to installing the infrastructure for those developments. So if the risk is if you get an alka sequence development, so one that's at the top of the catchment, for instance, council is required to install the infrastructure all the way up to that, to service that piece of land, and then have to wait for the development contributions to come in at the later date. So that means that you will need to have some borrowing capacity in the meantime until that land is developed. One of the advantages, though, of development contributions is you can actually start charging, I guess, a contribution towards community-type infrastructure. So there's an option there to charge towards parks or reserves, aquatic centres, stadiums, those sorts of things. And also you can charge, I guess, a component or growth component of headworks, so yeah, treatment plants in particular. Yeah, so yeah, financial contributions is very much a user pay system. So those who, you know, using that infrastructure pay for that infrastructure, whereas development contributions are more of an overall, all developers pay on an equal basis or semi-equal basis.
So if we can tie that to our conversation that sits with environmental services and the district planning, would it be advantageous to have one over another, with potentially with what's ahead of us, if we were, you know, hypothetically to want to encourage more growth in residential, you know, green space, greenfields development?
Well, your greenfield development is where you're going to get your most development contributions, income coming in. But there is a bit of a hybrid option, which is what we're using, for instance, on Bruffs Gully, where we have a financial contributions policy, but it's set among the whole subdivision as such. yeah, where you've got multiple landowners, it's quite difficult to get financial contributions from one particular landowner. You know, they don't like paying the infrastructure going across a neighbour's property, for instance. So, but with Brough Scully, we've managed to, you know, come up with a formula that allows everybody to fairly pay in their contribution. Now we could do that for other land areas where we're proposing to doing development area plans for along the Pages Road area, the Elton Gardens, Callans Hill areas. Yeah.
So that's a great one, actually. So with the DAPS in development contributions, how would that fund? Because currently we have to fund the DAPS, but if we had development contribution policy, would that help fund?
Yeah, we're paying for the DAPS, and you're right, there will be a financial contributions policy developed as part of those DAPS.
Because my challenge at the moment is where it feels like we're heading is we're going to end up funding developers, and the ratepayer is going to be subsidising the development, and whether that's right or wrong, that's up for discussion through a proper process. But if we're properly considering all income streams, which Jason's highlighted, you know, we probably should, then this is probably one that we should be front-footing now, because we want it to be a part of the LTP. So if we don't do it now, then we know we're considering it.
An example of that is Washdyke, where a policy is chosen to fund the upgrading of the existing infrastructure to basically cater for those developments. It's another option. Yeah.
I'd hate to get to March and we need to have a conversation about this.
Yeah, I agree, because if you're going to do a development contribution policy, you need to do it through your LTP. Yeah.
Right.
But we also do need to have that growth information. So to get that done for this next LTP may be a bit of a push, because we're having to invest a lot of money in doing these development area plans to have the information to calculate.
If we put our solution-focused hats on, how do we get to a point where we've considered it for the LTP?
I think also the issue of development contributions, there was some apprehension about how hard you'd push it if you were going to lose your three waters, because it did contribute to some extent, and we already had our FC, so there was generally, I think, from previous councils, Paul, not a lot of appetite necessarily for DCs.
Previous council had a leg in each camp.
Yeah, yeah, a leg in each camp, and then if you overlaid that with the uncertainty around whether water was going, if you go back 2 or 3 years, whether water was going to be in or out, it became a bit of an area where you could be investing a lot of time and money in a policy that might then have to be significantly changed again. Yeah. And we have FCs, which we are maybe not quite as broad, but we do collect, and we've used to recover in terms of the infrastructure going into various developments. So if we are going to look at it, it will require some investment in resource, and we probably want a pretty clear steer that that's what we want to do in order to get it going.
The other thing with FCs, it tends to push brownfields development, infill housing, which is because we're looking at getting our efficiencies from. Yeah, that's the focus of the council. Previously is to look at infill, and that's what the focus of the district plan is.
Can you have a hybrid model whereby, or is it, can you have a hybrid model, development contributions on greenfields versus infill?
Well, that's what the DAPs are really going to achieve, where we...
My question is who pays for the DAPs? Yeah. What I'm trying to get it back to is a point where it's funded by the developer, they wear the cost. That's probably a discussion for council, but if they're the one that profit, so development contributions are more in line with that than a financial contribution. Is that correct or not?
No, with development contributions, you can only charge those for the growth component of the infrastructure. So the actual preparation doing the DAPs and everything else would still be a council cost. You wouldn't be able to recover that from developers in the future through development contributions or even financial contributions.
Right.
So we are, if we're going to take the lead on facilitating growth and development, we need to do the DAPs and pay for those, which is what is the intent of the proposed district plan.
I didn't really get an answer. Should we be considering development contributions policy before the LTP as part of it? What do elected members think? Any views?
Well, the developer should be paying for everything that's required for them to connect to our services. And they should probably, if there's a amortised amount that perhaps should be added to the rates for the section, or I'm not sure how it works, but perhaps for a period of time, I'm not sure, or just a bulk amount per section.
Andrew, that we have that sort of model at the moment, that hybrid model, it exists at the moment. So that's how it's done, rather than over one landowner, it's done over the subdivision. I think that's what I understood. That's what the hybrid model does now.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, that is correct. Yes. And then whether you're using development contributions or financial contributions, the developer is still responsible for putting the infrastructure into service within the site. It is the development contributions and financial contributions pick up, I guess, the costs of having sufficient capacity infrastructure to take that land use development. So.
The difference between the Washtite one, that I presume, sorry, I don't actually know whereabouts, but that would already exist. New renewals. That example you gave before?
Yes, that's correct.
Yeah.
Basically, a lot of the roads, for instance, weren't wide enough, didn't have curb and channel, so council is funding that as part of the contribution. Where Rough Scully, there's a lot of land that needs to be taken for roading, and that cost is distributed across all the land.
Me and Nigel, should you be considering one? I think rather than just try and give a yes or no now, why don't we try and provide a reasonably high level document about actually, here are the FCs, here are the DCs, here's the hybrid model, and here's what's required in respect of each, and present that back. I think might be an easier way for us to address it, because there's probably a few things we just as officers want to tease through and put into a report,
No,
and then say, look, broadly.
I mean, that can even be a 1 hour workshop or something initially. Probably
Yeah,
makes sense. And
but
so,
with some modelling.
and my question, how does that, you've modelled Rough Scullies on financial contribution. It'd be interesting to know that scenario, what that would do if it changed to DCs.
Correct, yeah.
Because I can see that being an issue if we've modelled it on one and then we change to another potentially. I'm not sure.
It could change it.
It could.
Yes. It tends to average out things instead of it's whereas FCs is very much a user pays.
That's right. We'll go with
on the development, isn't it?
Yeah, on the development.
On the development, it's user pays rather than.
Okay, no, well that would be helpful, and then that gives us time to feed in. So that would be in a November. We can November maybe.
Yeah.
I think we
could do that.
I think we can do that. Yeah, I think we can look at that.
What does, as far as Vincian?
Through the chair, you can request that report to develop a development contributions policy, and that's what you're actually talking about, because there's a lot of engagement with developers and things, because it's a significant change for them. We would put it out with the LTP for consultation.
No, to fully get that, but as far as bringing us more information,
Oh,
yeah,
more information
yeah,
easily.
yeah, no, that's fine to line with LTP.
Yeah, we're sort of thinking the first cut is some sort of model that says, look, here's what
Yeah.
FCD sees, the hybrid model, and some, I guess, some broad level modelling about the kind of numbers, I think, is that we produce, so you get an idea about what it is that you, in terms of revenue,
Yeah.
what does it generate,
Yeah.
as I understand it.
Yeah, yeah, 100%. No, that's good. Thank you. And so that's my first question. My other question is, you know, and take, you know, what is deliverable? Well done, Gavin. I love that too. Great look. What should we be doing around our current facets of council that need a 17A review across them? So when have we completely reviewed, you know, if you look, and I'm not saying these are what they need, but these would be obvious examples where you've got 26.13 million and 26.12 million in roading and Three Waters services. Yeah, so under the Local Government Act, I think it's within a 6-year period, effectively, isn't it? We've got to review its levels of service. Sorry, Vince, you might part. Yeah, great, thanks. So I've got to.
Yeah, I might be able to answer you. Basically, the Section 17A reviews, you're right, it's every 6 years, or when a major contract is due to be renewed. So the roading and Three Waters have recently been done within the last 3 years because of their contracts requirements. So yeah, comprehensive reviews were done.
What the legislation states is you're looking for the most cost-effective and efficient delivery of the services. And so it outlines CCOs, in-house delivery, contracting out, or hybrids. So what's supposed to happen is you come back with a report to council to say what the costs of all of those things and the recommendations.
As we saw the 17A review on Three Waters as an example, which was added for the second meeting. And although I agree with the approach that we took, now we're almost in the next phase around consideration for the next 3 years. So can we have those 17A reviews just put on the hub for our information, the roading and the Three Waters, and then also what, and they were just easy because they're big numbers, but you know, I know I've talked with Trudy, and I'll highlight to you, Bede, around social housing, and that's an obvious one to look at. Partway there through parks, yep, we're partway through. So what other 17A reviews should we do to line up? And bearing in mind that we're taking a deep dive look at costs this LTP. So is there anything else that we're missing that we should be looking at?
I would suggest that maybe what you could ask is for a report from SLT that they actually come up with a list of recommendations as to what potential activities could merit a Section 17A review with a look at efficiencies, improved efficiencies, because there could be some things that may be better outsourced to, like, say, another council who may have more resources available for that. Or it could be that responsive type of service, if that works. I know Christchurch City has just recently instated we group that goes around in direct responses, but it's proven to be very popular to the complainants. So, you know, and that's just a little mobile group, response group that goes out and patches up what they need to rather than outsourcing that through the process of a contractor. So that's a tangible example of what another council's done. But I would recommend that you just ask for a review from the SLT after the AMPs to make recommendations for council to come up with a schedule.
So the conversation that we're supposed to items that we're, isn't it?
Is about some of the principles and issues, and it is a discussion amongst your anything, but it is talking about what are some of the trade priorities. Are there some nice to haves, and mechanism that you can look at on how to reduce some of the rating impacts. So it's those type of things that we're inviting you to engage in. And it's not a conversation only for today. Today is the beginning of the conversation because you're going to revisit this all throughout this process.
Yeah, for me, it's thoughts around the financial strategy in terms of debt levels, capital depreciation rates, some of those items as well, to help give direction, I guess, to the organisation to move forward.
Well, it's for me, it's about financial prudence and obviously living within our means. I think as the long-term lots of things have changed, and we probably had to compete with obviously interest rates trebling from where the last ones were. Also, the CPI has. So there's all these natural things that are actually driving those numbers up. We've only got a certain amount of money, and therefore we probably need to cut our cloth, in my opinion. So most of these projects have gone up extraordinarily, and obviously the theatres one in hand. We started at 29 million. Probably started lower than that. Here we are, we're now at 57 million. And, you know, for instance, just on that item, $1 million based on the 57 million, because we've already got 7 million, they paid us 4 point something. So, and the interest every week just %. So every week, that theatre is costing that amount of money. So I'm not sure what you think you're going to charge for a show. It to be a hell of a lot. So and that's without paying it off. And that here we are, we're talking about 80 years, and I do not see 80 years as being a number that should be used in the equation. 50 years as outlined in the IR. So I think that's the starting point. I think it's the water, the three waters, the roading, and then obviously well, number 4 is probably our civic facilities, I guess. So those are the things that we should almost work out how much money and work our budget out from there, and then let's look at those projects. Stadium. I guess the Argentine is underway. There's a big another 50 million added and a continuing liability. That is a major issue.
Top that, Boothie. I guess operating cost is. You know, we make these decisions in splendid isolation. You know, I can tell you the Ashburton Council puts 400k a year into. We've never really discussed that. there'll be some discussion that we put a person in somewhere in the budget. But before we make solid decisions, been missing, and also concerned coming. You know, that could be $60 million. Well, we need to be aware of that when we points out the bucket of money is going to be empty, and we need to make Michelle just showed me before, 3 years ago we were going to review all our facilities, council-owned facilities, whether they had value or not. We haven't, and to your point, Jason, we need to do that, whether they're being used, whether there's a better way of doing it. And my other thing, I guess I do get concerned, and it ends up being big money, cost tens if not hundreds of thousands of dollars, and then we change our mind. Is there a better way of delivering that? Or are we sure it operates? That's some of the conversations, because, you know, we want it to be a great figure rates and saying people, hey, but we're doing good things. I take Nigel's point, we need to sell where we sit compared with others. We're delivering. And I'm not sure we do that well. So, telling the story. But I also think we need to make lost in some ways what the council are doing. We give you a budget and on it goes, but we don't actually find out year to year what that is and whether actually it's essential or it's a nice to do. You know, if I take your Three Waters, Andrew, you've doubled from 3 years ago what you need just to get by. I want to see what that is, because there might be decisions we go, no, or that can be over a longer period. I'm with Alan though, I don't think any building can be over 80 years. We've got to be real with our funding, because over that 80 years, we will redo the interior 3 times at multi-million-dollar costs. So let's get real about the numbers. You know, that's where I want to be.
Yeah, and that's interesting. And whether you do it over 50 or 80 years, at least there is some depreciated funding in there to do that refit. And that's the key thing, is that the depreciation sits in there in a realistic manner to be able to do that work.
I guess that's not to mention the amount of money they need to collect from the ratepayer for the depreciation over and above the number I just gave you.
Yeah, but if you look at our total asset book, if it were our total assets, if we were depreciating them all, which we're not, but if you look at that $1.7 billion worth of value, and you get to a point where actually renewals are fully depreciated, then, you know, what does that look like? And actually that's the trajectory that we want to get to, that we are allowing more in depreciation to fund those renewals when they come up, rather than having to approach it a different way.
But then the 100% of depreciation should actually be being spent on infrastructure and replacements. Well, it's actually, some of it's being siphoned off and actually capitalised into staff costs.
Associated with the renewal.
With different projects that are on the go. It's been a constant number in our reports every 3 months.
But to that specific asset class, which is what we do. I'm not sure what the issue is.
Councillor Booth, sorry, the depreciation fund is spent on renewals or replacements, is it, Andrew? Yes. And that is capitalised. So that's what the depreciation fund is used for, that. And we are, as I said before, we are essentially consuming that full depreciation every year. In fact, we could up the amount of depreciation if we were fully funding it, as Jason said at the beginning. The question is, how much do we want to? But it is all getting spent on capital. I don't think there's any of it not going to capital, and in fact, I think the auditors probably, that I know that they check the OPEX versus CAPEX spend quite carefully when they do the annual report every year. It's quite it's a big part of the Q&A between the auditors and officers.
Yeah, you know, there are some councils, and I'll give an example, Waimakariri or Selwyn, where they have a lot of new assets. So their depreciation, I know with Waimak in particular, they're not spending their full depreciation. So there is quite a significant reserve, and I think from memory, Waimak has about 20 million sitting in the bank at the moment, but we're not in that situation. Our assets are, as I said before, towards the end of their useful life, and we're having to actually fully fund a renewal program.
And their average rates are a lot higher than ours as well, because they've been through having to reinvest post-earthquake, so, yeah.
Yes.
I think you've got to be careful using phrases. Great one for the quote book, but, you know, siphoning off without putting some substance around where you're siphoning funds off to.
The numbers are simply capitalised as going towards projects, and that's what I mean. They take so it's our staff, they capitalise the number against the project. So, anyway, I'm just looking at the debt, and the last long-term plan we were maxing out at 200 million, and now it's 280 million. So we're only 3 years down the line, and that's increased by 25%. So, and our income has increased as well, obviously, but still, what's going to happen in the next 3 years? Are we going to be having a similar conversation? So I just think at some point you've actually got to pull your head in, actually, and not spend so much money, and actually have something up your sleeve. We do not want to go to maximum debt, and I'd be quite disappointed if that's where we headed, because we won't leave the next generation or next group of councillors any space to do anything. At some point they will have to stop spending and live within their means, and we should actually be starting to think about that right now, and set a number and actually live within those numbers, and we do that by prioritising what the requirements are in order to continue the services, but obviously some of these capital spends on infrastructure and whatever, we need to actually carefully consider the appropriate order and the prudent way to go forward to ensure we're not overcommitting ourselves in case we end up paying a whole lot more interest potentially. Who knows where that's going to go? But it's probably, you know, who knows. But the problem is we are here now and we are responsible, and I would be quite concerned if we left it burdened our next triennial or the triennial after that with nowhere to go.
I think the other thing that you've got to consider is actually we've got to a point for whatever reason, because repairs and maintenance wasn't spent on the library, and the way I analyse this is, and this is actually probably credit to engineers. The engineers over the last 20 years have been great at getting money in the budget, and they've been running the horizontal infrastructure, and then you've had the vertical infrastructure sitting on accountants, and so they're pretty quick to remove repairs and maintenance and all those sort of things. So you've got an accountant laughing in the background, a couple of them. So you've got to a point where actually our investment needed is in vertical build, and you've got a moment in time which is catch up, and that's the moment in time that we're in this 6-9 years either side of us, whatever, that you've got to get that back up to date. So actually, yes, future councils won't necessarily be able to do a lot because a lot of that vertical infrastructure has been replaced, and then at that point your debt ceiling is going to be going back down like this. And so that's what, to your point around the questions that you're asking, is part of this process, and the asset management plans and considerations, debt ceiling, all those things, and it's just the part of the LTP process that we're going through.
I guess just on the looking forward, I'd like to get all the genies out of the bottle, like Andrew again said about roading. I want to know from the council officers what else is in front of us in the next 10 years, be it roads, bridges, that we know is coming up, So when we make our decisions, we make them fully knowing what else is in front of us, because that has been a missing piece a wee bit.
Yeah. Sorry. Yeah, so no, I agree. An example for me probably would have been the last, going back 3 years, what I deem should have probably been in a pre-election report was the CDN water scheme that was actually missing, and it was $17 million roughly of investment that we didn't know until the new council came on board. But being a council in the previous council, I didn't know that. So to Stu's point, I think we just need to know every little detail.
Perhaps I'll just say something about the our three waters and our. It's obviously our biggest number that we actually are investing in, but I think that should be driven by a requirement to reach the standard that the new authority have implemented upon us. So it's not like we want to go here when we only actually have to go here at this stage. And I think so. That's one way we could actually simply peel things back a little bit and actually work towards. We may have 3 years. I don't know what you'll be more informed than me, but a certain amount of time before we have to meet that achievement. And so therefore that is the focus and probably the priority number one for me, and then perhaps roads and then civic facilities after that.
Sorry, question. As far as water schemes though, once we get the Waitoa pipeline fixed, we're actually fully compliant as far as water schemes, aren't we?
Apart from Seadown. And then there is also Beautiful Valley, but that's a very small scheme. It's only 10 users. But
It's actually technically a stockwater scheme. It's a stockwater scheme, technically.
it's a stock water scheme.
Yes, so
but there
if
is,
it remains a stockwater scheme, it's fine.
it's a decision that council needs to make at some point, is confirm what it is. Is it a stock water scheme or is it a drinking water scheme? I would suggest it's a stock water scheme. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I'm going to have a couple of words. I thought I was being entertained by both of you for too much of that. Yeah, I actually personally think that although this is a challenging time for us, it actually presents some really exciting opportunities. And looking forward to hearing the EMPs and looking at different ways of doing things and delivering results. And I know Mayor Nige started the conversation when I first came on board about having a look at the things that perhaps can be brought in-house, and we talked about the potholes and all of that sort of thing. And one of the things that COVID created for us is that as the challenge for some of our contractors, they delivered a different level of service in many different respects, and we saw how much of that was tolerated by our communities and how much isn't tolerated. So we're going to have to think about those things differently. So how we deliver various services and out of our OPEX, not just our CAPEX, because I think it's easy to look at some of these capital projects and say we're going to save 10 million bucks there. And I think not necessarily. So we're going to have to change in some respects the way we look at BAU. And that to me is an opportunity. And like I say, looking forward to hearing the AMPs and getting stuck in from that respect.
Probably have a different view to Councillor Booth. I think the civic, like the roading and the water is important. I always think that, but the civic stuff is also important because that's what brings people to our district. Roads and water do not bring people to our district, and so I think that stuff has to be done. And we can't have a town without a theatre, without a stadium, and without an art gallery. They're kind of like the core things that towns have. I'm not adverse to lifting the debt cap so long as there's a plan to bring it back down, and so long as it is a hump and there's not 3 or 4 other humps straight after it. I also think we need to look at the social housing and the housing, and rather than prioritise projects and say we're going to do these 6 and not those 2, I'd rather go how can we do all 8 within that financial package and still deliver them. They just won't be gold standard because we can't afford that. That's probably all I have.
I agree too, but I suppose that challenge, going right back to the start, that Jason, you said the 30-year infrastructure strategy, and we only do a 10-year financial strategy, and it's about balancing that. That's sort of triggered me today, but, you know, I think you're right too, Councillor Pye. I think, you know, we can still deliver. We've just got to work out how to do it and be solution-based, you know, and I feel, you know, just reflecting and looking back on how the council has operated over the various years, you've got to start making decisions, and I feel that sort of stopped for a while. You know, if you look at the theatre, it should never have gone that long on making a decision, and so we've got an opportunity now to actually start delivering on some of these projects. It's got to be affordable, and I get that, but you've actually just got to start getting stuff done, because otherwise we'll be still sitting here and my grandkids and your grandkids won't even have a theatre. So, you know, but I know we've got to balance that, but we actually need to start making some decisions instead of going round and round in circles. So, yeah, I look forward to the next session.
Oh, sorry. No, look, just a comment. We did, you know, if I go back 2 years on, you know, financial strategy, we did think that we would have to be, just for background, that we would likely be considering debt caps at this point. So it's where we expect it to be to some extent. So, yeah, for those new ones.
I agree, Mayor Bowen. We did expect to be up the top of our debt cap a couple of years ago. For me, it's about resiliency, and that's the most important. And we will do that with our water, with our microfiltration, which was in the last long-term plan, and with our roading. But I also agree with the projects. We need to be delivering on them. We've consulted with the public. The public have had their chance. They've directed us as governors. We've listened to them. We've put into plan, and now we need to deliver. So it's about following through and closing that circle. So that's where I stand.
Yeah, I guess from a rural side of it, I think that probably the rural people are more dedicated to thinking that council should go back to its core businesses of water and roading and stuff like that. So, yeah, if it's affordable, those nice to haves are great to have, but, you know, we need to be within our means. I don't know that we can afford to put our ratepayers through a double-digit rate increase again year on year. I think that's just too much to handle for a lot of people and the way the financial headwinds are. So I think it's just, yeah, figuring out what our needs are, what our priorities are, what our wants are, and then putting them into a queue. And obviously with what Andrew's said today, there's some headwinds that we can't see and roading and stuff. So, you know, we need to still make sure that our rural people are connected to the city and things like that. So I think that's where I'd like to be heading for this long term.
This is the first long-term plan I've been involved in, so I agree with what people are saying, bits of what people are saying. I know when I'm doing my own budget at home, I'm trying to do the best to live within my means that I possibly can. And the whole time that I've been in council for this past nearly year, it just seems to be that we are relying so much on debt, and I'm not used to those sort of figures that are being bandied around. But I'm also aware of the fact that, as Councillor Pye was saying, yep, the roads and the water, it's all vital stuff. But you're right, people don't come to this district for that. Although, of course, they do come for good water, and that's an important thing. But they do come for all those civic facilities that we offer. And I just can't imagine being in a city or a town this size and not having a theatre when we have one in Oamaru and we have one in Ashburton. And, you know, I've been quoted on the radio as saying, well, we've got a show coming here. If you're in Ashburton or Oamaru, you can go to it. But unfortunately, in Timaru, you can't, because we haven't got a theatre and haven't had for the last 4 years. So that has to change. And we do need these sorts of civic things to to make our town or our city a great place to live. But what I want to see from this long-term plan is some sort of plan to pay back some of the debt. It just seems so incredibly high, and we don't seem to be really focused on bringing that debt level down. So I want to see more of that.
So you can't, so to give you some perspective, you can't have a theatre and bring your debt level down. You can't. So, and we'll map this out over the next few workshops and what have you. And so you will get to a point and you'll be coming down to the future. But when we're recovering, none of us may be around the table when we're back to 100 million of debt. That's just the reality of what it is. And just to give you some perspective on councils as an infrastructure provider, if you look at the water entities, they were looking to borrow up to, I think, 6 times revenue. So 6 times their revenue versus our up to 2.8. So there is actually a lot of capacity within the system of infrastructure providers. The same within, it'll be interesting with DPP4, what the ability for those entities within the electricity infrastructure providers to fund around their asset renewal. So I know it's hard one to get your head around sometimes because they're big numbers, but as far as actually providing these sorts of, especially the utility type of infrastructure where we've currently got $100 million worth of debt, and I've always actually looked at it and thought a proper model actually should be within council, should be your utility, your horizontal type infrastructure and your vertical build over here. So potentially you've got a debt cap on your vertical build that might be a 1.5, but actually your utility type water infrastructure might have a higher 3.5 as an example, and your average might be what it is, but it means actually you're maintaining the asset according to a specific ratio. But I'm sure that will never come into fruition, but you heard it here in Timaru today if it does ever.
Through the chair, you can do that if you want to in your own strategy.
Yeah, just one point I will make out is, when we prepare these long-term plans, and you as a council, between a rock and a hard place in some ways, you do it 10 years, and that's based on the standards, and the goalposts are there. But then the government moves the goalposts, and this is happening through that 10-year period. And this is the situation where we've got with waters and roading all the time, is that unfunded mandates from central government increase costs. And that, at the time when we set this long-term plan, we were unaware of that.
Andrew, based on that, and this is speaking to your experience, you've been around a couple of decades now, as far as my serious question, as far as the water standards, how many times in that period would you have seen them change to a point where it's actually reflective on what you need to up your spend on? Is that consistent? Because you look at what's happening now and you wonder, well, actually, can the water standards change again? I would question they probably can't go too much higher once you get to that point, unless there's some specific, health study around nitrate in water or that's proliferant in our catchments as such. And then you might have we might have to meet a standard on something that's not already there. But I sort of question, is it going to go any further? I'd say probably not.
It is a hard one to answer because you need a crystal ball to do it. But yeah, it tends to go in steps, and usually it's through some sort of crisis or something that it pushes that increase in standard. And the Havelock North one was the catalyst for the last lot, which has increased costs for water supply right across the country immensely. Yeah.
And you're going to have more of probably a more pragmatic view come in if there's a change of government too, because you've got costs wastewater discharge to land versus discharge to water as an example. You're throwing hundreds of millions of dollars more infrastructure where you're discharging to land. It actually isn't achievable. It shouldn't even be a consideration really, should it? So you wonder if some of those standards may actually change because when the costs is brought into it, it's just not affordable for a country as indebted as New Zealand is.
Yeah, and I think to your point, Brian, if you do look back and you take water as an example over the last, 5 to 10 years, not only have you seen this really appreciable increase in the cost of replacing the assets, but in terms of maintaining and operating the network, all of the usual drivers around energy, chemicals, etc., they all go up. But in terms of those standards going up, if we look at the qualification and competency requirements of the teams that operate our water treatment plants, that service our networks and so on, all of them have jumped significantly in order to make sure that you meet the requirements of your water safety plans. And they do drive right across the board quite significant increases into the operating costs. So it's not just in the depreciation, it's really the requirements around the training, the skills, the ongoing training, the testing, all of that. And when you run it across schemes all having to come up, then it is an appreciable increase on top of any drivers that might come as a result of just the usual sort of cost inflation or CPI cost increases.
Yeah, we have to basically monitoring is a huge cost these days. We have to continuously monitor. If we don't monitor it for 1 minute, we have to report.
Yeah,
it's just those sorts of requirements, so that it increases the whole technical competency required of operators because they're operating using this equipment now.
And of our IT infrastructure and so on, so that it's all licensed, it's all maintained at a standard that enables that monitoring full on. I think what's been really helpful here is that the two documents that I think will be really important are the financial strategy and the infrastructure strategy, because they give you that long-term view into where you're going, and you do see the debt levels, for instance, you do see the assessed conditions as we understand it of our water networks, our wastewater, our roading, but they give you that horizon as best we have it from that 10 to 30 year period. So I think they become really important, and we'll emphasise those documents and the component parts of them as we come forward. I think that would be, I think give not answers but visibility into the way you might want to shape and frame some of the issues about those long-term matters. And if we're really honest, water is a very big part of our business and a big part of our economic enablers, and in a sort of a notional sense, irrespective, I think we'll have a lot more clarity on October the 15th about the direction of it, and that will help considerably. We can make all the assumptions, but it'll be good to be able to just wipe it and say, yep, this is the way we know now with full confidence that we're heading, whatever that outcome might be.
I think it should be noted that, infrastructure does actually bring people to this district because, look at our growth, it's all economic growth. So you need good roads, you need good water systems, you need good wastewater systems, and that is what's attracting our growth at the moment. So
I think the point being, they won't come from infrastructure alone. They'll want to, because if they have disposable income, they'll want the point being made that with disposable income you want to do something. So you need sports fields, you need cultural facilities, recreational facilities, the sea bays, the parks, the reserves, the art galleries, the museums and theatres and so on for people for that span of activities. Yeah, it's not as I suppose. Yeah. Pardon? Yeah, he does, and it's great to have the engineers. Because as I've often said, really, when you look at if you look at a number of areas around the country and you talk about the Wellington model in more ways than one, our networks generally perform pretty well in an area that, when it doesn't perform, man alive, people know in a heartbeat when water's not performed, when your water doesn't work. We all know, and we know immediately. And the networks do generally, touch wood, search for anywhere I can find it, generally pretty well performing.
Right, I think that brings us to a natural conclusion about the importance of the financial strategy and the infrastructure strategy. I'm glad that that's the note we're ending on. That was our intent and purpose for today's workshop. So I thank you all, councillors, for participating. I thank the senior leadership team for their support and for being able to provide some clarity. We have a few notes from today of some things that you have asked for, and I will be sending you out some follow-up material, as I said, the assumptions and the priorities list for what you think the big issues are for the district. We will see you again, of course, on the 10th of October for our next workshop. And in the meantime, we will be beavering away in the background, producing the goods for you so that you have something to discuss. Thank you, councillors. Harimai, have a great day. And can I please have the reference group stay behind? Thank you. We conclude.